Hi, I'm Robert Schramm, a behavior analyst, education specialist, author, and dad. And I'm also the developer of the 7 Steps to Instructional Motivation. Each week, I provide you with helpful information based on the Just 7 Steps approach. So if you haven't already subscribed to my Just 7 Steps YouTube channel, take a second, do it right now. You'll be glad that you did. In today's episode, I want to talk about why it is so important that people who have the training, experience, and ability to use important behavioral principles to guide their decision-making are making this information available to parents and teachers just like you. Let's face it, parents are struggling all around us. You see them in the stores, in the schools, at the parks, in your own extended family, and on the internet. Parents frustrated, unhappy, and just plain struggling to figure out what they need to do to get their children to make better choices and work with them in guiding their growth and development. Let's take just a moment and check out these parenting memes that I found online. Now, I agree that many of these memes are funny, but comedy comes from truth. And if people are struggling enough for these types of jokes to be universally appreciated, then something is wrong with the way we teach our parents. And part of that problem comes from where parents are getting their help and their information. Who have you gone to for help over the years? Family, friends, a parenting expert? And aside from meaning well and having some experience as a parent, what are the qualifications that these helpers are banking on to assure you're getting good advice? As I've continued my work in parent training, I've been astonished by some of the advice I see peddled to families from so-called parenting experts. I've seen advice ranging from you should spank your kids to don't ever punish your kids in any way. I've seen advice ranging from give your kids tons of positive praise to don't ever use reinforcement, which should be a clear flag to anyone who knows what the behavioral principle of reinforcement actually is. So what is it parents do in a world where everyone wants to sell you advice, but most of the people selling advice are relying on their own experience and a few parenting courses or some internet research to help them determine their approach? Well, I'm not a giant science nerd, but I do believe in science and the scientific method for understanding the world. Anyone can have a hypothesis and anyone can give it a go based on a hypothesis. But whether or not that hypothesis proves valid in a single experiment or even two does not necessarily offer it value as a standard or a principle. Scientific principles are things that have been experimented on over and over again in hundreds or even thousands of situations with many different types of subjects, and they have proven to be true each and every time. It is only when this happens that you can say something is a principle. So when someone tells you that you should give your kids a light spank on the butt to inform them of the error of their ways, this person may believe that they're correct because in the specific situation they were in, they may have used spankings and they may still have developed a reasonably positive relationship with their children, while their child may have learned to avoid some behavior related to the spankings. But does this somehow prove that spanking is a good option, the best option, or even a reasonable option compared to the other options available to parents? Obviously, it proves nothing. It isn't even an indication that spanking was the overriding factor in that child's development, as there were likely thousands of other variables at play in that relationship. So nothing infuriates me more than seeing the internet filled with self-professed parenting experts whose vast experience consists of raising a few kids and taking a couple of local parenting classes. If you were to look at the overwhelming research done through meta-analysis, physical punishments make a child more likely to be physical with peers, adults, and often can lead to a damaged relationship between child and parent. That doesn't mean it will happen each and every time, but spanking does have a correlation with these negative outcomes making it less valuable of a tool to those who know how to use other options. If you want your parenting to have the best chance of being the optimal option for your kids, you have to understand more than what may have worked for an individual with their individual kids. You have to see how that procedure actually stacks up to other options across a wide swath or different types of parents and children. And then you can see if there are any trends or clear indications of cause and effect that would make that choice valuable enough to you to use. I can understand if this is a scary thought to you, because who has the time or access to the information that would help you to make those decisions? I mean, most parents don't. Heck, most parenting experts don't. The people who have this information and have been able to use it and benefit from it are the ones who have studied it, the ones who've trained in the science and learned how to apply the principles that have been identified within that science. For parenting, we are talking about the science of behavior, the scientific pursuit of understanding what affects the behavior of individuals and how to use that understanding to help the world with important societal problems. Behavior analysis is the field that does this. It is based on understanding human behavior. It has identified what affects our behavior choices, and it helps those with the education to know how to use the scientific principles of behavior to help guide their recommendations. When I make a specific recommendation for any parent of any child, I'm not basing that recommendation on what feels right to me. I'm not basing it on what may have worked for me in a similar situation with my own child. I'm basing my recommendations on whether or not it has been shown to offer a positive effect, and that this positive effect is preferable to other options that might also offer positive effect as well. No matter what I'm asked by any parent, the first thing I always do is go back to the basic behavioral principles. Does this thing they want to do make sense behaviorally? If so, it becomes an option. Then I want to look and see if there's any behavioral research that has addressed this or meaningfully similar situations resulting in more evidence that the plan is a good one. Then I look at my experiences working with thousands of individual children over the past 20 years and see if my past offers some information on the benefits of the plan as well. And finally, I have to look into the child's past history to see if there's anything there that would indicate whether or not this is a good option for them. All of this would be considered a basis for something being called evidence-based. After having done this process for years and years, my knowledge of the types of recommendations that are more universal becomes clearer, as are the variables to look for that might get in the way of success. I also then help parents know how to implement the evidence-based plan with a way to determine objectively if they're seeing the expected results. If not, I can then fall back on the behavioral principles and my past experiences, using them to help detect what might be off or might be missing or need to be changed. When someone tells you to spank your child because they did it and it worked out okay for them, it doesn't take into account the actual research that suggests that physical violence, even in moderation, can have long-range negative effects on the children who experience it. And when a so-called parenting expert who has raised their 4 kids and took a few parenting classes see research that says hitting or spanking is not a good idea, they can then turn around and say things like, all punishment is bad for kids. Again, this is not a true statement, as there are lots of procedures that these people recommend instead of punishment that actually qualify as the behavioral principle of punishment. Let me give you a quick example. There is a parenting expert who runs something he calls Dad University. His goal is to offer dads like him a place to go for parenting advice specifically filtered for fathers. I don't think there's anything wrong with this concept, and it may be an underserved population when it comes to parenting advice. But when I watch his videos, he has such a mixture of good and bad advice that it's hard to know what people are actually going to pull from his university. I'm sorry. I know air quotes are stupid, but I don't know how to describe this stuff without them. So I watched 2 or 3 of his videos, and again, some of the advice was quite good. It made sense. And I didn't disagree with it in general. However, in each video, he referred to his research and evidence. In one, he even quoted B.F. Skinner's definition of punishment, but then completely disregarded it with a horrible statement that punishment doesn't work. Now, if he was truly educated in behavioral education, he would be able to define different types of punishment and differentiate between them and state things like why some might work better than others and some might carry unwanted negative effects that you should avoid. He might be able to steer people towards the use of antecedent manipulations and consequences that can reduce behavior while limiting the negative possible effects that come with some punishment. He might even lead you towards shaping, but he isn't able to do that. His parenting classes and home-based research was not able to give him enough behavioral understanding to really help people in the deepest, most meaningful way. All children need to learn healthy boundaries. They need to identify when their behavior is harming their relationships and hurting them more than it's helping them. Part of a parent's job is to show kids how to identify and respond in these situations. But when the only advice is never use punishment and instead just talk to your kids about why what they did was wrong, you're going to be in trouble. And here's why. Firstly, some kids will respond to reason and have the necessary parental respect and desire to please that would allow them to benefit from this sort of consequence. And that's great. If you happen to have a child who wants to please you more than they want that ice cream at the moment, then you can explain to them that ice cream is bad for you and that only special occasions you're allowed to have ice cream. And your child might react positively to that. But what if they don't? What if talking it through with your child doesn't lead to the desired outcome? What then? What's your next step? Where do you go when your only guidance is to talk it out and never punish? Let me ask you a question. If your child pushes past you and grabs the ice cream cone off the counter and starts to eat it, should you let them eat it and talk to them about why they shouldn't do that again? I mean, chances are, if they pushed past you and got to eat the ice cream, the principles of behavior dictate that they will be more likely to try that again the next time that they don't get what they want. So let's say you decide to take the ice cream away and then to explain to them that they shouldn't take ice cream without permission and it is only for special occasions. Well, guess what? You just used a form of punishment. You removed access to a preferred item after a behavior with the goal of reducing the use of that behavior in the future. That's a form of punishment called negative punishment. And here's what drives me the craziest. If you are told to not use punishment by someone who quotes Skinner's definitions of punishment, but then the person says you should, in the moment your child makes a bad choice, just sit them down and talk to them about it, reason with them, explain why it isn't a good choice. The bottom line is if this works, which it might, if it does work, what you just did by sitting them down and talking to them would also be defined as punishment by Skinner's definition. So there are so many reasons why I shiver when I see non-behaviorally educated people trying to give parenting advice. I know that their intentions are good, and some are even actually quite good in the advice that they give. However, not basing your advice on behavioral principles is not a strong recipe for success for most families who are needing help, especially when you start to consider the many developmental disabilities and disorders that children can have, from autism to Down syndrome to Fragile X to ADHD to oppositional defiance disorder to OCD. In another video, this same dad expert suggested that you should use positive praise to support your kids when they make good choices, but you should never use reinforcement. Okay, I'm just going to let that one sit there for a minute. You should use positive praise, but not reinforcement. Well, I hate to be the bringer of bad news, but for many children, positive praise is reinforcement. And if it works, it is working only because it is reinforcement. Also, if positive praise is not reinforcement, guess what? It's not going to work to increase the behavior that you're hoping to see more of. As you can see, this is quite unfortunate, as some of these parenting experts have tens of thousands of followers, and many are paying money for advice that may or may not be any good for them and their specific child. What I think a behavior analyst and parenting educator who has experienced working with hundreds of children of all types, ages, and disabilities offers is a deeper understanding of not only what advice is generally good advice, but why that advice is good, what it does behaviorally to help the child, and how it might need modification depending on the situation. What a behavior analyst can do is identify the most important behavioral principles that matter to decision making and teach them to you so that you don't need advice on each and every problem that arises. Instead, you can learn how to set up your own environment in a way that simply makes sense behaviorally and will motivate and reinforce your child's best behavior while also building a stronger relationship between you and your child. I believe that this is exactly what the 7 Steps approach is uniquely designed to do for you. It teaches you, whether you are a parent or a professional, how to benefit from the most important behavioral principles related to cooperation, engagement, and positive relationship building. It's how I interact with my kids and how I interact with my wife, and my friends, and my coworkers, because it is what guides positive relationship building. And you can learn this too. You can learn not what to do for individual problems, but what always needs to be done to avoid those problems. And when they do occur, how to fix what you're doing to avoid them in the future, all while helping you to teach your children important life skills. I do offer a course sequence that teaches these principles in a format of the Just 7 Steps approach. And it can be the answer you are looking for to never need to look outside of your own knowledge base for help or guidance again. But I know it can be hard to put time and money into something that is only recently being introduced to you. So instead, I'm asking the listeners of my podcast to take the opportunity to go to my website and take my free workshop called How to Get Your Kids to Listen Without Raising Your Voice or Nagging. It will give you a great opportunity to see the difference between getting parenting tips and learning parenting principles from a true professional in the field of behavior analysis. Again, it's called How to Get Your Kids to Listen Without Raising Your Voice or Nagging, and it's available right now at my website, just7steps.com/workshop. And for those of you who have taken my workshops or trainings and the 7 Steps in the past, you should know that I've recently completely reworked how I present and teach them. They're now a series of short, clear, fun modules that walk a parent or professional who wants a better understanding of the Just 7 Steps approach through the process in under 30 minutes at a time. And there's been a lot that has changed in the way that I teach step number 7, as well as a few of the other steps. So if you're looking for the most modern way to apply the 7 steps to instructional motivation, either for your own kids or the clients and parents that you work for, come to just7steps.com. And if you want to try the free workshop, check out the /workshop page. And remember, it is good to look for advice when parenting, especially if your children are offering unusual challenges or diagnosed with developmental disabilities. Just make sure that whoever you're getting your advice from can tell you not only what you can do, but why it should work and how it fits into the larger understanding of the important parenting principles that will help you avoid future issues as well as the ones you're worried about today.